أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي واجعل لي وزيرا من أهلي هارون أخي أشدد به أزري واشرك في أمري كي نسبحك كثيرا ونذكرك كثيرا إنك كنت بنا بصيرا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم وصلى اللهم على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Welcome everyone. We'll continue with our discussion on what nature is in terms of how it's used in the current civilization in our day-to-day life. And Suhail is going to give our summary a little bit in terms of what this section is about, and inshallah we'll continue. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Suhail.
assalamu alaikum. So we've been talking about this is the 23rd flash, and Nursi goes through what is nature. So he's having a discussion with a person who is a disbeliever. He doesn't or I guess yeah, he becomes a believer after his discussion about nature and submits to the truth. But the first part of the flash was deconstructing nature. What is nature? Why do people refer to things as nature? And why is it, what is the problem with referring to things as nature? And nature does this or nature does that, or it's also about causality, cause and effect. And he shows that nature really isn't a thing out there. It's just something we make up to describe things, processes, and that all sort of effects or the things that we observe belong to a necessarily existent one and an absolute one. Um, so the creator of all things at all moments, at all times. Um, so that was nature, and you can probably go through some of the recordings previously that goes more in depth about that, his discussion. And then this person gives up naturalism and believes, but he has questions. First questions about, what is uh, why is it a big deal? Why is there a concern if we neglect the five daily prayers or we ignore it? Um, and why is there a punishment as hell? If you say that the Quran is like very, elevated, stylistic, um, and he goes to explain that. And then the second question, and he explains that through the perspective of nature. One, previously talking about nature, but now about creation. Why it's not only important but necessary um, for these things. And then second question was about how do you explain, or how does Nursi explain the infinite ease through which the Quran talks about creating, and he references the two verses. I mean, these verses are repeated these type of verses are repeated many times in the Quran, but he says your creation, resurrection is as a single soul, and the matter of the hour shall be but as the twinkling of the eye, or even closer. So he discusses that, which is what we previously discussed. Um, and he goes over the qualities of divine knowledge, divine power, and divine will, and he gives metaphors of how easy it is in comparison to how difficult it is for an infinite number of verse to create themselves or bring themselves into being at any moment. So he talks about it from the perspective of this world and how it pertains to the resurrection, how easy it is also therefore for the resurrection to take place. So that's the second question. And now we're going to be talking about the third question. And notice like all these questions have to do with the answers have to do in reference to what we previously talked about with analyzing the world or looking at the creation and understanding these verses and how they explain the world and answering these sort of doubts or questions that we may have. So that's kind of a very, very brief summary of what we talked about. And again, I would recommend probably listening to the prior talks, which can be found online. But I guess we can pick up the third question now, which is the last question, I believe, of the 23rd flash.
Yep. So Suhail, you want to lead? So
Okay, all right, okay, I can. All right, so the third question, So the former enemy and now rightly guided friend, and then asked. So again, he's asked two questions previously. One about, okay, I accept that there is a divine source who is creating at every moment, bringing things into being. There's no such thing as nature because things can't do those things. They don't have any knowledge, power, or will. And um, I accept that when he talks about prayer, I accept that prayer is sort of like our expression of this acknowledgement, and to not pray would be sort of an insult to the creation because we are ignoring the purpose of creation by not praying or at performing our acts of worship because we are sort of the Khalifa, the representative of the world. And that's why punishment exists to sort of wake us up. Not as sort of like to scare us per se, but like to show us the severity of the thing we're doing, because we're ignoring the purpose of creation. And then secondly, um, the second question being how absolute power, absolute will, with absolute knowledge creates at an instant with such ease all things at once, um, from the seed to the fruit. The seed, the tree, the fruit, and then in that fruit is the seed, and so on and so forth. The cycle continues. Um, whereas versus each part creating itself, the seed creating, the tree creating, and the fruit creating. So how complex it would be, impossible it would be. So now this third question is, now he's a former enemy. He's given up naturalism. Now he's rightly guided. And he then asks, philosophers who have made many advances in these days claim that nothing is created out of nothing. So this is, you know, said back then when he wrote this, who knows, maybe 60, 70, 80 years ago. Um, Still hear that claim today to avoid divinity, to avoid um, Godhead or a source. Claim that nothing is created out of nothing. The claim it's completely baseless. And nothing is annihilated and goes to nothing. There is only composition and decomposition, and this makes the factory of the universe run. Is this correct? So just complete, as the Quran says, like magical words or complete poetry or misguidance there. So the answer is, since the most advanced philosophers who did not consider beings in the light of the Quran saw that the formation and existence of beings by means of nature and causes was so difficult as to be impossible, in the manner proved above, they diverged into two groups. So he says, most advanced philosophers, because they did not have the Quran or didn't see things in the light of the Quran, they rightly saw that the existence of beings by nature, by the means of nature and cause was so difficult as to be impossible because it is impossible for things to come into being on their own or for something called nature to do it. In the manner proved above, they diverged into two groups. So they tried to find two solutions to this conundrum or problem. One group became sophists, abdicating reason, which is exclusive to human beings, and falling lower than mindless beasts. They found it easier to deny the universe's existence and even their own existences than to follow the way of misguidance, which claims that causes and nature have the power to create. They therefore denied both themselves and the universe and descended into absolute ignorance. So they just simply said nothing exists, even myself, which is interesting because even the fact that they question things makes you wonder then how can you even say that? Because they didn't want to follow the way of misguidance because it was impossible. They just said, let me just get rid of my reasoning, ability to reason, and just claim nothing exists. Um, the second group saw that in misguidance, according to which causes and nature are creator, um, the creation of a fly or seed even entails innumerable difficulties and requires a power unacceptable to reason. They were therefore compelled to deny the act of creation, to say, nothing can exist out of nothing. Seeing total annihilation also to be impossible, they declared, what exists cannot go to nothing. They fancied an imaginary situation in which combining and decomposition, gathering together and dispersion occur through the motion of particles and the winds of chance. So, um, so again, the second group um, saw that attributing things to things in the world, the creation of things to things in the world, and that nature is a creator is impossible. Just even the creation of a fly or a seed, it's innumerable difficulties. So they denied active creation and said nothing can exist out of nothing. Um, so, uh, which is, that doesn't even make any sense, but just said it, you know. So there is no cause or real cause or act of creation. So there's nothing, and nothing can come out of nothing. So seeing total annihilation also to be impossible, they declared what exists cannot go to nothing. They fancied an imaginary situation in which combining and decomposition, gathering together and dispersion occur through the motion of particles and the winds of chance. Um, so uh interesting. It's sort of a thing that don't really quite understand because it doesn't make sense, but that was the second group. Now,
Well, I have a question before we go to him.
hmm,
What do you think is like the prevalent right now in this day and age? Do you think that which, I mean, this is ex nihilo, right? That's what the philosophers were saying, something like ex nihilo,
hmm.
right? That nothing comes out of nothing. And this
Yeah,
ex
from or out of nothing, ex nihilo, correct. So which doesn't actually, I mean, make any sense because nothing isn't even a thing. When you can't talk about existence, can exist out of nothing. Well, nothing can exist out of nothing. Nothing doesn't even exist. There, you can't point to at nothing. There's no such thing as no thing. The moment you point to something, you're talking about something, and that something exists or it happens to be. So in some way, they're almost kind of like the first group. They're saying that um, that there is this world out there, um, but it comes out of nothing. And what we're witnessing or experiencing is just pure chance, motion of particles, combining and decomposition. So, winds of chance. Again, it's almost like saying nature does this, even though there's no such thing as chance. You can't point to chance. I mean, I don't know what that even means. Um, so it's like sort of a middle position. On one, as he says, they don't want to accept the act of creation. Um, so so you just say it came out of nothing. Nothing can exist out of nothing. Um, so that's kind of what I think almost is pretty much being said today, by philosophers and atheists. I don't know if that's my reading of it. I don't know if anybody else has any
like
thoughts.
the scientists, like physicists, probably also.
Correct, yeah.
So they say, like,
So
for example, ether or anything vacuum that is there
yeah,
outside.
yeah. Even though there's no such thing as a vacuum, even if you ask them, is there such thing as a vacuum where there's zero? Is zero actually a thing? Is there a zero vacuum? Or meaning a vacuum in which nothing exists? No, it's not possible. So there's always something. And so you have to ask, what is the act of creation? Is it the innumerable causes that you attribute in the world? But it comes with innumerable difficulties and unacceptable reasons. So you have to accept a divine source, or you just say it comes out of nothing. So, you know, um, that's what I um, understood from that.
Yeah, there were a few hands up, I think. Adam, you want to go first?
Assalamu alaikum. Excuse me. Um, what I what I have always understood from the position of the philosophers is that they've said that the universe is like one fixed entity or one entity is like self-subsisting, self-existing. Like, if I understood correctly, like from the time of the Big Bang, the universe is expanding, and the universe itself, uh, within itself, components is expanding. There's nothing interfering outside of it, right? This is the kind of way I understood. And to your point, Brother Asim, about ether, if I understood correctly, they think that the particles of the universe are as though eternal, because the particles will continue to change into different forms and formats. So they don't go away, they don't annihilate. And likewise, nothing comes on existence, because everything should be from its original state of being when the bang happened, or coming out of that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like things being eternally existent in some way, as in like almost as if there is no time from when the particle was and was not and is. And so, so as he says, there is no such thing as annihilation, and then things are just rearranging themselves, combining, rearranging, decomposing, and all occurring through chance.
Right.
But still, it's still like if you even ask them, like, okay, how does the Big Bang happen? Like, even you don't really need to, you can just look at the moment. But like, if somebody says, well, I'll just go back to the Big Bang and things are just existent through then, presuming just the eternal existence of things. I mean, the thing still falls apart at that moment, even at that moment, and
Yep.
that's what they don't want to answer.
Emphasis is on like now, right? When the questioner asks the question and he says, how can I understand what's going on right now? Right? Things don't come out of non-existence. Things are all from what's already here and existing.
Yeah.
Then we're
No, you broke
what it
up.
says.
Can you repeat it? You broke up for a second. I don't. Can you guys hear Adam?
He was
I,
breaking up for me as well.
we broke up actually. Yeah, you're right.
He muted himself. You're mute on mute.
I'm on mute. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I think what's important is this. The summary of it for me is the way in which they've kind of concocted this worldview of seeing matter as being eternal, matter as being ether, matter and the universe itself as having some self-substantialities where it can just move and change and flow into new forms. It takes away the whole notion of religion, takes away the whole notion of worship of a creator, and certainly negates the Quran, goes against what the Quran is teaching. So I'm just saying there's two fundamental things. From this is a historical thing that many, like Aristotelian philosophy, I think taught this, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That matter and ether is eternal, and that itself is really has the qualities to do things, and that plagued a lot of people's minds, and it does continue to do so. But now when the Quran comes, the Quran says, look, the things are being created out of non-existence. Like, man was not a thing to be existing. Man was not a thing, and man is brought into existence. This universe was not a thing, and it's brought into existence. And the forms that we see and the things that we see are not a thing, and they were now, and then they're brought into existence. I mean, that's very critical to understand and to think about, because that's really where the whole notion, the whole core of like worship comes out of, and belief comes out of. So I'm just saying that I think that these ideas have been pervasive, like they've been like kind of like plaguing minds for many centuries, maybe I would say. So that's how I understood what we're talking about. I just thought I'd add those elements.
Yeah, I mean that even to this day, people still think that way, unfortunately. I mean, even if they don't realize it, as you said, that and even with like people's understanding of the universe now, that it's not really eternal, but they operate in a way in which they see the world as being eternal. That things have always existed and things are just happening now by chance. And so the particle is eternal. It will it'll never annihilate. But even that's been sort of disproven too, in the sense that, it's been shown that particles come into and out of existence. You ask any physicist, they'll tell you that. Um, so it, but the overall underlying presumption or philosophy about the world still remains. So now people say instead of nothing can exist out of nothing, they say something can come out of nothing. So just tweaked it a little bit, but um, yeah.
Muawiyah has been very patient. Go ahead, Muawiyah.
Like, okay. I just wanted to add a point. A lot of times that people who purport these claims of there's always a chance, and I guess even this first group of sophists who abandon reason, in reality, they're only applying these very particular philosophies to the field of religion. Like they would never open their fridge, and if they see like a cake in there, they would never assume, oh, it's due to chance, or it's the molecules in the bread and the flour and the eggs in my fridge randomly reassembled. Not even for a moment would they consider, oh, it could be due to chance. They only apply these certain principles to religion, and everywhere else in their life they apply like separate or different principles. So I think I would call it a sort of like persistent denial or hypocrisy in belief. I would also like to mention that point as well, just to add on to that discussion.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Marshall. I mean, yeah, people, it's like cognitive dissonance. In their practical day-to-day life, they don't operate by those same principles. But, it sort of goes back to like the previous questions Nursey was talking about, in that, submitting oneself to the truth, like leads you to attack religion, because specifically, and especially the Quran, I would say more so than any other book or religion, is because the Quran um, is sort of an all-encompassing view of the world. And, it doesn't, well, one second. So it's sort of an all-encompassing view of the world, and it doesn't allow for any room for divinity, for the world itself, or creatorship to the world itself. And so, the believer must hand over everything back to the creator. So, including even their will, or how they choose, what choices they make. And, and because the truth is so clear with the Quran, they have to find some way, to do so. I mean, at first it started with, specifically Christianity in Europe. But, Islam is very much so a target now, because it's so crystal clear in its message, as Nursey explains in like the prior parts of this flash. Um, any other comments? Awesome, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I said both of these groups basically that he classified basically are because they cannot, so they understood basically that causes is impossible basically to give existence. So they're both denying basically the existence and they're ignoring that. And then of course that leads to the denial of the existence giver. So I think that's a bias already even in some, I know like they're like some adamant kind of advanced scientists and philosophers who kind of propagate this message basically just so that there's no concept or notion to accept that, yeah, there must be an absolute creator or something to these, to the existence of things. So they kind of not mention existence at all. Just like in sciences we study, there's no mention of, even if you study biology, chemistry, whatever you study, there's no mention of existence at all. Right? So there's an influence right there as well that happens in our day to day, how we perceive things in the universe.
Yeah, I mean the inherent bias is there from the beginning, as you said, because the moment you ask that question about how do things come into being, what is something, and how does that something come into being, then you have to talk about divinity, God, religion, and people don't like talking about that, especially a lot of these atheists and theistic philosophers, scientists. So, um, all right, well, we can keep going. Now, see, those who consider themselves to be the most intelligent are the most profoundly ignorant and stupid. It's a great statement. He says, those who consider themselves to be the most intelligent are the most profoundly ignorant and stupid. Understand just how ludicrous, debased, and ignorant misguidance makes man, and take a lesson. Indeed, a pre-eternal power created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Every year so indeed, a pre-eternal power created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Every year creates 400,000 actually, let me just stop there. I mean, maybe he says 6 days. I don't know what it says in Turkish, six periods, six, you know, people might read this and think this is sort of a Christian view, but
Stages or
I mean, it's really like, I mean, Siddhati Ayam can be like periods or stages, 6 stages. Every year creates 400,000 species simultaneously on the face of the earth. And in 6 weeks, every spring constructs a living world more full of art and wisdom than the world itself. Thus, it is more foolish and ignorant than the sophists, the first group above, to deny the act of creation and deem it unlikely that, like a chemical, when applied, shows up in visible writing. Thus, it is more foolish and ignorant than the sophists, the first group above, to deny the act of creation and deem it unlikely that, like a chemical that when applied shows up in visible writing, pre-eternal power should give external existence to beings, which, though externally non-existent, exist as knowledge, and whose plans and measures are determined in the realm of pre-eternal knowledge. Um, so here, I mean, he's showing sort of the ridiculousness of the statement above that nothing exists because you can see things first and foremost, like by your own sensory experience. 400, I mean, there's more than that, but at the time, what they probably understood was 400,000 species when he wrote this on the simultaneously existing. They happened to be on the face of the earth at the same time, coming into being in their particular form, particular to them. And then every spring, a living world more full of art than the earth comes into being. And then it's more foolish and ignorant than the sophist to deny the act of creation. So I mean, you see all this and then you deny the act of creation and deem it unlikely that, like a chemical that when applied shows up in visible writing. Um, Pre-eternal power should give external existence to beings, which, though externally non-existent, exist as knowledge, and whose plans and measures are determined in the realm of pre-eternal knowledge. So I think what he's saying here is that um, uh, it's more foolish and ignorant. Okay, I'm not sure I understand the structure of a sentence here, but um, if anybody has any thoughts. But I'm not understanding what he's trying to make a point about, like a chemical when applied shows up in visible writing. If he's saying that's foolish or not foolish, or even unlikely or likely. But the second part is he's saying that um,
I think the chemical is like there's some substance that gives basically existence to beings. For example, any particle, right? That chemical is a particle maybe that when applied shows up whatever was not there before.
So I guess maybe in his analogy, he's saying that invisible writing is like knowledge. Um, and the chemical or sort of the power and will makes this knowledge manifest. Um,
Correct. That's
so
what I understood. Yeah.
yeah. So um okay, I got it now. So he's saying that it would be foolish. Oh, Adam, go ahead.
When he says chemical being, put out, placing a chemical, then the writing showing up, invisible writing. It's like an element of the universe is now causing another element to just all of a sudden become beautiful. How does that happen? How does one element, as if a chemical putting down a chemical, releases invisible writing that somehow happens to be organized wisely, saying a statement, sentence, information, ideas? That's how I understood it. Like there's nothing in the universe that can cause something else so profound to just come out of into existence, as if like the analogy is using, as if you just put chemical out and some invisible writing comes out uh, on somewhere. That's how I interpret it.
Yeah, that I can see what you said. It's just a little confusing when he says it's more foolish and ignorant than the sophists to deny the act of creation and deem it unlikely that like here I understood actually what Asa was saying, that I think he's comparing power um to the chemical to giving should give external existence to beings. Um like they didn't exist externally. They exist as knowledge, as we talked about in a previous section, in divine knowledge. But then his power gives them some sort of external reality. That's kind of how I understood it. Like he's comparing the act of creation to power manifesting knowledge that is sort of invisible. It's not a material thing. Um, that's kind of what I understood. So, but
I understood it as it already exists in the universe. Another part of the universe just needs to unlock it so that the universe is producing this. It's not coming from any source or anyone beyond the universe. Like there's something already written on the page, but no one can see it. But another part of the universe, i.e., the ink, comes and or the chemical comes and gets placed over it. Suddenly, that those words are there, as
so
if
so how do you explain the second half of the sentence though, when he's talking about pre-eternal power should give external existence beings, which though externally non-existent, exist as knowledge, and whose plans and measures return in the realm of pre-eternal knowledge?
that's the Quranic view of how it should be understood, right?
See, that's what I think. I think he says like a chemical that when applied shows up in visual writing, pre-eternal power should give external existence to beings. That's why I thought he's making a comparison. But yeah, I mean, it could be what you're saying, but that's what's confusing me, is that he's like, that's why I thought he's comparing a chemical to like he's trying to give a comparison analogy in this world.
Got it. Okay, I'm sorry.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like he's giving an analogy in this world. How does power act? It's like a chemical that makes invisible writing visible.
I see.
So pre-eternal power makes knowledge which exists, but you can't see it, and gives it an external reality. That's what he says. It gives it external existence to beings, which though externally not like, as in when they didn't exist, they were just in knowledge. So they don't have an external existence in the world, but power gives it that existence, external existence. So I think that's what he was saying here. So
Like an analogy, basically.
correct, yeah, like an analogy. He's saying about a chemical. So what he's saying, then therefore it's more foolish and ignorant to deny the act of creation and deem this act unlikely, in which like a chemical showing up in visible writing, a power should not give reality to knowledge. And the reason he's saying this is because you can look to creation, look how many species come into being in this sort of revolution of the seasons, how much come into being every spring. So they weren't there, but they sort of had developed an external reality in the spring. So,
Yeah, so they existed as knowledge and then they get manifested based
correct.
on
Yeah.
power and
Yeah.
will and all the other qualities.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can keep going then. Those unfortunates are absolutely impotent and have nothing at their disposal. So those unfortunate, I'm guessing he's referring to the sophists, are absolutely impotent and have nothing at their disposal apart from the faculty of will. Although they are inflated, like pharaohs, they can neither annihilate anything nor create anything from nothing, even a minute particle. And so, although nothing comes into existence out of nothing at the hand of causes and nature on which they rely, out of their stupidity, they say, nothing comes from non-being, and nothing goes to non-being. And they even extend this absurd and erroneous principle to the absolutely all-powerful one. So, what I understood from this paragraph, you know, all individuals have is their will. Like we don't have the power to create. Like even a pharaoh who claims, I am your Lord, as the Quran says. Like we really don't have any power to create anything from nothing, not even a particle. We just have our will, our choice, or how he explains in other parts of the words. Like will is just simply our sort of alignment to the world, how we position ourselves in front of the world. But we don't actually create anything. Um, and so, although nothing comes into existence out of nothing at the hand of causes and nature on which they rely, out of their stupidity, they say, nothing comes from non-being and nothing goes to non-being. Um, so, as he's saying, um, in some ways, the first part's correct. Like you can't have no thing come into existence out of no thing. That's not possible at the hand of causes and nature on which they rely. So because causes in nature aren't really a thing. So, that nothing can come out of that nothing, because they aren't even a thing you can point to. But they extend it to say that nothing comes from non-being and nothing goes to non-being. So they sort of ignore the fact that the world exists and just say things are sort of, in some ways, pre-eternal in a way, like they're just eternal. Um, you know, so like oh, I get what he's saying. They're essentially saying that there was things have always existed. There was never a point in which the thing didn't exist. I think that's what Adam's talking about. So what are we even talking about the act of creation? They're just saying everything has always existed. Um, even though your experience of the world completely negates that, because when he says you see all these species come into being in the spring, they didn't happen to exist. Like, how did that happen? So, and then the second group will just say, oh, it's just particles rearranging themselves by the winds of chance. Well, then at that point, then you have to take to the number of sources of being, the number of gods, the number of particles in the universe. So it's like falsehood upon falsehood. So, but I don't know if anybody had any thoughts about that before you go on? Okay. All right. I think it was self-explanatory. Indeed, the all-powerful one of glory has two ways of creating. So he's going to show the opposite view. The first is through origination and invention. That is, he brings a being into existence out of nothing. Okay. So they were saying nothing can come out of nothing, but this nothing, North is not nothing as in like it has no knowledge, like it wasn't in the realm of pre-eternal knowledge, as he says, like it was within divine knowledge, but it doesn't have an external existence in our reality, in this material world. He brings the being into existence out of nothing, out of non-existence, and creates everything necessary for it, also out of nothing, and places those necessities in its hand. So, like for example, he gives the tree example where he brings the seed into being, but he also brings the soil, the sun, the air, the water, all necessary things for the seed to, become a tree and then produce a fruit. So nothing is independently existent. All things are reliant upon one another. They're interdependent, as he says, mutually cooperating. But they existed within pre-eternal knowledge, but he gave them external reality through power and will. So kun fayakun, be and it is. So the second, actually, before I go on, does that make sense? Do you have any thoughts, questions about that? Okay. Molly, you're going to say something? Or is that you're just giving it a check mark? Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense so far.
Yeah. The second is through composition, through art. That is, he forms certain beings out of the elements of the universe in order to demonstrate subtle instances of wisdom, such as displaying the perfections of his wisdom and the manifestations of many of his names. Through the law of providing, he sends particles and matter which are dependent on his command to those beings and employs those particles in them. So the second is through composition, through art. That is, he forms certain beings out of the elements of the universe in order to demonstrate subtle instances of wisdom, such as displaying the perfections of his wisdom and the manifestation of many of his names. Through the law of providing, he sends particles and matters which are dependent on his command to those beings and employs the particles in them. So, I think he talks about the first way through origination and invention, things coming into being out of what appears to be non-existence or non-being, really. They didn't happen to be. And then the second one is through composition, meaning sort of arranging the particles in a certain way. And the same elements can be arranged in an infinite number of ways to demonstrate his infinite names, his perfections, his wisdoms. So like he shows, that's the second way of creating, is that he can show composition from the same elements, show the infinite number of ways in which he can create. So that's how I understood the second way. Okay, we'll go on then. Yes, the absolutely all-powerful one creates in two ways. He both originates and he composes, so we just talked about. So he originates beings, and then he's able to arrange those particles in the way he wills or determines. So those elements. So he makes the elements and then arranges them. Whereas like us, we don't really, at best we can choose to arrange things in a certain way, but even that is not by our power, it's by his will. We just make a choice and it happens to be that way. So like when I build a wall out of bricks, like I'm making a choice. Like I didn't actually create out of non-being those bricks or the particles, the elements. I'm just making a choice to rearrange them. But even that is sort of like a little bit misleading, because even I, by my will, like I can't create my will, and then also my will doesn't have the power to actually move anything. It's by his will do things move. There's no inherent power within me, but that's what he's saying here. Origination and composition. To annihilate what exists, to annihilate what exists, and to make exist what does not exist is most simple and easy for him. So to annihilate what exists, so to take things from being into non-being, so like death, and to make exist what does not exist, so birth, so like for life, is most simple and easy for him. It is one of his constant and universal laws. The man, therefore, who says he cannot give existence to what does not exist, in the face of a power that in one spring makes exist out of nothing the forms and attributes of 300,000 animate creatures, and besides their particles, all their conditions and states, such a man should himself be obliterated. So in some way, the spring is like the two ways in which he originates those elements at the moment's notice, and at the same time also is arranging them at the moment's notice into all these different creatures, and species. And they're both infinitely easy for him. And then to bring about their death or their non-being is also infinitely easy for him because there's absolute power and will behind it. So the person who gave up nature and embraced the truth said, "Praise and thanks be to God Almighty to the number of particles in existence, for I have attained to complete belief. I have been saved from delusion and misguidance. Not one of my doubts remain. All praise be to God for the religion of Islam and complete and perfect belief. All glory be unto you. We have no knowledge save that which you have taught us. Indeed, you are all knowing, all wise." Chapter 2, verse 32. And that is the end of the 23rd Flash. So anybody else have any comments or thoughts on this before we conclude?
Sorry, if I could just jump in. What do you think is the correlation between these paragraphs we read and perfect belief?
So to me, like why he says complete or perfect belief and why he says all particles in existence, that's sort of the essence of Tawheed in that no thing, la ilaha, there is no power within the world. Nothing has intrinsic power. Nothing has intrinsic knowledge. Nothing has intrinsic will in and of itself to create from non-being into being and arrange themselves. And we see that to the number of particles in existence. That's sort of perfection of belief. So we hand over all power to him, all knowledge to him, or any quality we can think of or perceive in this world. They all belong to him. He's sort of the source, and we are just sort of all things just a manifestation or reflection of that. So there is no room to say like, oh, maybe I'm doing something, or maybe the plant is growing and giving me fruit, and it determined that. Just like that little doubt, that little idea, that's sort of not complete or perfect belief. Because belief in a sense, or Islam shows that things are just clear cut, black and white in terms of uh, do things actually have any power? Do they really have any will? Do they have the power to create anything, really? And when he says that the number of particles, he says that there is no thing that demonstrates that, not even possible in existence. So that's sort of like Tawheed right there in a nutshell. So in Islam, in a sense, all praise be God for the religion of Islam and complete and perfect belief, because Islam leaves you no doubt about the truth. Like it gives you just the unadulterated, clear truth, as he demonstrates. Like this is what it shows, and it's obvious. So, um, any other thoughts? Okay, inshallah, I guess we can probably end here. Inshallah, we'll pick up a new section next time.
Inshallah, sounds good. So just like this verse 232 says, all glory be unto you. We have no knowledge save that which you have taught us. Indeed, you are all knowing, all wise. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين بحمد سورة الفاتحة.